Well, hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle and this is Afterburner. You know, I'm old enough to remember Jimmy Carter's famous malaise speech back in the summer of 1979. Militarily, economically, and socially, the United States was demoralized, inefficient, and listless. Carter told us that we were in international decline due to national malaise, and not because of his wild-eyed, unrealistic, Brezhnev-kissing policies of appeasement and human rights. You know, we hear the same thing from the White House today. The American people are lazy. We're not trying hard enough. We're making him look bad. President Obama deserves an American people he can be proud of. Hey, speaking of 1970s presidents, when Richard Nixon announced that he would resume relations with Red China, it was said that only Nixon could go to China. What that meant was that only a politician with a lifelong record of being tough on communism had the credibility to establish ties with that communist nation. Now, likewise, only Barack Obama could have cut the deficit because only a super-liberal social worker would have had the street cred to be able to say that spending levels on entitlements were unsustainable and that you could cut the entire military, all of it. In fact, you could cut all of discretionary spending completely, and we'd still be facing ruinous deficits because of entitlements. No, instead, he has tripled or even quadrupled the annual deficit, and he has added half again as much total debt in 3 years as the previous 43 presidents combined. He's taken desperately needed capital out of your pockets and spent it on ruinous projects like Solyndra and the Chevy Volt to create by fiat the kind of green economy that exists only in the minds of tenured Harvard political science failures. He's crippled our leading exporter, the sole remaining jewel in the American manufacturing crown, that'd be Boeing, by allowing the ideological apparatchiks in his administration to prevent Boeing from taking occupancy of a $2 billion factory after it's been built because it irks them that the plant was built in a right-to-work state. At the cost of hundreds, if not thousands of jobs, President Obama has prevented the import of oil from our best friend in the world, that'd be Canada, so that we may continue to send trillions of our dollars to our worst enemies and fund our own destruction. Worse than that, he's not only hindered, but he's outright forbidden responsible use of the vast energy reserves lying directly beneath our own feet and off our own shores. But he is willing to spend a few $1 billion of your hard-earned money to make sure that Brazilian companies get a subsidy to drill for oil in the supposedly environmentally sensitive Gulf of Mexico, right next to the Chinese oil rigs that are out there and growing daily. He mortally insulted the remarkably disciplined and professional men and women at the detention center at Guantanamo Bay by calling it a stain on America's honor. And in his second day in office, he promised it to be closed within a year. The detention facility remains open, thank God. He campaigned against the enhanced interrogation techniques that handed him the location of Osama bin Laden, and when that location was confirmed, took anywhere from days to weeks to make a decision to remove bin Laden, the execution of which happened while President Obama was at his mobile command center located in the back of a very expensive golf cart. After viciously criticizing the courageous decision of President Bush to surge our forces in Iraq, a decision that essentially ended the war in 2009, he and his administration mismanaged simple negotiations to keep non-kinetic stabilizing forces in that country. He claimed credit for the victory, and as we speak, at this very moment, we see he did not end the war in Iraq, but it does look like he has ended the peace. Protesters in Syria, Egypt, Iran, Yemen, and elsewhere turn their eyes and ears towards America for support and leadership and see and hear nothing. Our dearest allies are given iPods, and our most mortal enemies are given bows and apologies. He claimed that U.S. guns were fueling the Mexican drug cartel violence. When he was publicly shamed into realizing that that wasn't true, I personally am convinced he ordered his Justice Department to make it true. Operation Fast and Furious has cost literally hundreds of Mexican lives, but that seems a small price to pay in order to prove a point. The Occupy movement, endorsed by this president and his party as ideologically useful in their 3-year war against the fat cat millionaires and billionaires that, actually create all the jobs that are mysteriously not appearing, has dissolved into the gloom from which it came, leaving piles of human filth, hypodermic needles, rapes, ruined businesses, and broken windows. Goldman Sachs, of course, is one of President Obama's leading donors. He used legislation to buy General Motors as a gift to his union supporters, and we now find out it's costing each one of us about $250,000 per Chevy Volt produced. And we don't even get to drive the $250,000 cars that you and I are paying for, which is probably good since they have a tendency to catch fire. And we can go on and on and on in this goat rodeo of ideologically driven failure, but the fundamental fact staring us in the face in the beginning of 2012 is this. The economic and political big ideas that have been in vogue since the common sense, pro-growth economic policies of Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, John Howard, and many others have placed not only America's but the entire world's economy on the top of a soap bubble. There has never in history been failure of this kind of magnitude. Never. All of the money in the world is gone. It's gone. Where did it go? Who knows? But it's gone. And the only hope for us now, you and me, is to roll up our sleeves and use the fundamental principles of sound common sense, the first of which is you cannot continue to spend more than you make, and work our way out of this mess. And we're going to have to do it in spite of, in opposition to, and over the howling objections of those brightest people who ever lived who got us into this mind-boggling mess in the first place.